So ladies and gentlemen, here's presenting Shobha Dey, author, columnist, publisher, and social commentator. Being outspoken in an intolerant world. Exactly. Over to you, ma'am.
Must have had a really good night last night. Yeah. I need my shades, I'll tell you why. I'm not Hrithik Roshan, I'm not Shah Rukh Khan, but I need my shades this morning only to make a point about how tolerant I am. I'm sure this is going to be declared the most successful Goa Fest so far, going by last night's celebrations in the block where I live, which is, I think, guest space number 5. Till 5 in the morning, let me tell you, people were celebrating. I'm all for celebrations, but I wasn't sure whether they were killing themselves or just having a good time. So I hope whatever they were doing, they had a wonderful time, because it certainly left me very sleepless, and I did need my shades just to awaken every bit of me to say, my God, I'm going to be talking to the smartest people here, talking about an India which is in our fantasies, ek happy wala India. I wish that was so. But tolerance itself and intolerance, both are very loaded words. And I like the idea that we can interpret them still, so far. So I'd like to ask you, how many of you in the room are, for example, Biharis? How many of you are true blue Goans? How many of you think you're outsiders here? How many of you live in Mumbai and feel like you belong or are treated like outsiders? And what is the intolerance we're talking about? Frankly, I think India is hugely tolerant. We tolerate corruption, we tolerate dirt, we tolerate people who disgrace us. I'm not even going to talk about Panama right now, but we know what the headlines are saying. We are okay about rape. We are okay about the kind of unbelievable, unspeakable violence against women, against men, against children. We are okay with faces being blackened because the person expresses an opinion that we don't like. We are even okay with cold-blooded daylight murders of rationalists, thinkers, who don't toe the line. So, I don't know, this morning I was just thinking to myself, should I start by saying, Bharat Mata ki Jai, and ask some of you, are you willing to join me in chorusing Bharat Mata ki Jai? Because if you say you have a problem with it, there are good chances that Baba Ramdev will come after you and chop your head off, which is what he's threatened to do. He has threatened to behead people who will not say Bharat Mata ki Jai. And he says he would do it to hundreds and thousands of fellow citizens. And it's only something a little annoying, like the law, that is stopping him and his followers from doing the same. We have people of all hues and holy men, holy frauds, fraud god men, god frauds, women in saffron, women not in saffron, the Ovaisis, the Ramdevs, the Sadhvis, who are perpetrating the kind of hate that we have never seen in our country before. Despite it all, we all hope for a happy wala India. And that speaks of optimism, it doesn't speak of defeat. And I think the young of India carry that message forward so strongly and every single day. So what is happening in our campuses? The police have no business to be on our campuses. What is happening with an overnight phenomenon called Kanhaiya? Regardless of what you may think of his objectives, his motivations, whether he's a politician in the making. Well, he is a student at 29, but so what? I mean, you can be a student all your life. Doesn't matter. He made a seminal speech. That speech touched hundreds and thousands of hearts, not just in India, but across the world. In the last 1 year, there have been many such defining moments. In the year before that also, there were many defining moments. Somehow we tend to forget, because in India we have or maybe the whole world has very, very short attention spans. So today, Nirbhaya, okay, people say, oh yes, a terrible thing happened. Oh yes, there was a 1,000 crore fund that was created after Nirbhaya to make sure that violence against women there's something is being done in a more proactive way. I don't think even a crore of that fund has been utilized so far. Tomorrow we may say the same thing about Kanhaiya or what's happening, Rohit Varmula. We might say, yes, those guys, yes, those students who spoke up and they spoke a lot of sense. What was that they said? Ah, yes, oh, that's what they were speaking about. This is the kind of, I wouldn't even say it's indifference that really bothers me a lot. Intolerance is something which has become a politicized term, and it has become a politicized term that in a way suits all of us. It suits media, it suits, certainly it boosts ratings, and intolerance is open to so many different definitions. It depends on what you define as intolerance. I mean, I might say that I could have raised a ruckus last night. It was my right to get my sleep before I talked to you. I could have called up security and said, get those guys to stop breaking chairs and killing each other. If I see someone on a roadside being abusive towards a woman or a child or another man or an animal, yes, I feel intolerant enough to intervene. But in today's day and age, that word itself, when it was raised by people who didn't define themselves as liberals, but were defined as liberals almost in a way that was derogatory. Some of our greatest writers, thinkers, from Romila Thapar onwards, who, as a matter of protesting against an environment they found to be disturbing, if not downright offensive, returned certain awards that were given to them, and suddenly the word intolerance caught fire, and everybody was talking about my intolerance being superior to your intolerance, my intolerance is better than your intolerance, or my tolerance wins over your intolerance, and actually it really got nobody anywhere. Today we are pretty much where we were in terms of looking the other way and shrugging things off that we don't really want to engage with too much. We like our dreams, we like our fantasies. Sometimes even the advertising community goes a little wrong in most of the time they're telling us a wonderful narrative about ourselves, and a lot of the advertising today they are the sort of game changers that are talking about a different positioning, at least it's aspirational for women, or a different positioning for ourselves as a nation. But sometimes, even they can go wrong, as we saw very recently with the Pepsi commercial, which kind of made fun of campus politics and put it down in a way that, well, whether it was Hardik or anybody else, that's okay. There was a certain objective in making that ad. There was a certain, perhaps they wanted to raise awareness and cash in on an issue that is potentially right now, certainly all of India and even the world is looking at. And there are different ways with which one deals with tolerance and intolerance and issues of that kind. And when I'm asked that about myself, just to give you a little background, I just think being outspoken is perhaps in certainly in my DNA, I'm sure it's in the DNA of a lot of other people, you recognize that trait within yourself very early in your life, at least I did, which got me into a lot of trouble at school. It got me into a lot of trouble with my father, who was an authoritarian, old-fashioned, almost dictatorial, distant figure. And the idea of a preteen, a young daughter, talking back to him, not in a rude way, because I would never do that, I respected him too much, but challenging his point of view and expressing a point of view which wasn't in consonance with his views, was seen as something that needed to be corrected. And this kind of a correction, if it happens very early in life, and a young person is told that speaking your mind, speaking up for yourself, just being who you are, and taking what comes with it. I'm not saying it insulates you, because it absolutely doesn't. It makes you very vulnerable at many times. Is somehow not a good thing, that to keep quiet is better. And I think young girls are taught that very early in life in our society, in a very patriarchal system, which is not unique to India, not unique to Asia, it's pretty much across the world. We deal with it differently, that's about it. Young girls are told to basically keep quiet and let it go. And the favorite word in India when a young girl is getting married, and it's a word that I really have problems with and I feel intolerant towards, is adjust kar le beta. Now that word adjust is something that we take for granted as a society, and we tell everybody adjust kar le. Now I don't think that's what I would want the young generation to do anymore in India. There's no question of adjusting to hatred. There's no question of accommodating views that are perpetrating something that is intrinsically ugly and not good for society at large. There's nothing noble about adjusting ever in your life to injustice. And that's really what tolerance means, doesn't it? It just means you're not comfortable when you're confronted by something which is so unfair. And you feel as a human being, it's your right to speak up and, if possible, intervene, and even better, if you can help. And I'm sure there have been situations all of us have confronted at some point or the other where we are faced with that test, whether within our own families, community, school, college, colleagues. And we do what we think is the right thing at the time. If that makes some of us stand out as being too outspoken, well, so be it. And being outspoken is not necessarily a bad thing. I think in a world like today where silence is being imposed in ways that are insidious but also extremely non-negotiable, being outspoken, yes, it requires a certain amount of moral courage, but if we don't exert that right as citizens in a democracy, we are all going to be dead. Dead intellectually, dead emotionally, dead morally. And as a nation which has a tremendous cultural history of tolerance, of tolerating invaders over centuries, of tolerating, welcoming different faiths, what is happening today should disturb us all and should make each one of us outspoken and, yes, also at times intolerant. With that, I'd love to invite a vibrant and beautiful Kubra, who will be in conversation with me, and she'll be asking a few questions, and we'll be very happy to take questions also from the audience. And thank you. Are we all awake? Thank you. What would Goa be, for example? How tolerant would we feel? Goa, the Goan beaches without bikinis, Goa without feni. Bihar has just been declared a no-booze state. And we are being very, very tolerant about all these new rules and regulations. We aren't challenging too many things. I mean, a state like Karnataka, Bangalore, one of our youngest, most vibrant cities, all manner of rules and regulations about pubs, dressing, dating. The state is walking into our bedrooms, into our kitchens. They want to know what we are eating, what we are thinking, what we are doing, what we may do next. I mean, really, Kubra, I hope you're going to ask some wonderful questions.
Well, I'm looking forward to, ma'am, but then it would be wonderful if, ladies and gentlemen, you could give Ms. Shobha Dey a huge round of applause. Welcome her to center stage now. I, to be honest, don't know who needs a glass of water, her or me right now. But you know what, we're going to dive into our first question. It was amazing how right in the beginning of your speech, you covered intolerance and tolerance. But there's this amazing question that came here straight away. It's by Madhavan from Britannia Industries Limited. The question is intolerance a new phenomenon? Or is it a social media, or is it social media just amplifying it? So the narrative can change with Happy Walk India kind of advertising.
It is definitely not a new phenomenon. I mean, this generation has not invented intolerance. As a nation, we've been at different times extraordinarily tolerant and at different times unbelievably intolerant. But whether social media is driving the awareness and also the response to perceived intolerance, there's no question about it. I mean, today it's like to paraphrase Descartes, I tweet, therefore I am. It's if you don't tweet, if you're not on social media, you don't exist. So yes, there is you can whip up the kind of frenzy within seconds of someone saying something pretty innocuous.
And in like 124 characters.
And in 140 characters.
140 characters.
Yes. But, you know, these are the times we live in and we have to make our peace with them. And you cannot say, I will shun this new world, I will shun these platforms, because you have to deal with them and deal with them intelligently. The only fear about this, for example, Twitter can trigger off a revolution, right, as it did in Egypt, but Twitter can also trigger off murderous attacks. So it can, and in a flash that can happen. One wrong, irresponsible tweet can lead to violence and death. So along with the new freedoms that Twitter provides mainly to anonymous people hiding behind pseudonyms and different handles, the potential to, in fact, it's very explosive. And it's also scary because in India, with our multiculturalism and the number of languages we deal with, it's often a question of semantics, when a tweet is simply not understood because the language that is being used is not understood. Abuse, everybody understands, but anything that goes beyond abuse is quite often misrepresented or misinterpreted, and that can be very dangerous.
Well, yes, it's true actually. I mean, when was the last time you wrote "see you" ever? Did you ever write that? Ever? You're a very, are you a grammar Nazi?
A bit of, yes. I like my punctuations in place.
Well, I guess our next question is, you know, are the intellectuals in India, out of touch with the real India?
Not at all. It depends, what your definition of the word intellectual. For me, an intellectual is someone who's an original thinker. And every society needs original thinkers. And we have them, and we have hundreds and thousands of them, some of whom may have powerful influence within their own community and some in their own village or in their panchayats, and some who are recognized public intellectuals. Are they out of touch with reality? Not at all. I think they reflect our realities. Someone like Ram Guha, who is acknowledged across the world as a public intellectual, each time he speaks or he writes, it is so apparent that he knows what he's talking about. There's enormous clarity in his thinking, and what he's conveying is absolutely reality at the ground level. He's not talking up in the air, and even a Romila Thapa at her age is rooted in our ground realities. I don't think any of our publicly acknowledged intellectuals, they need to be more widely applauded, and even more than applauded, because they're not doing it for the applause. They need to be heard to start with, because their voices are being increasingly suppressed, and they need to be paid attention to.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, voices are being suppressed. Do you think they're being suppressed because they belong to organizations, or organizations are suppressing them? And do you believe you're more outspoken, or you have the liberty to be outspoken, well, because you don't belong to an organization?
As an independent person with absolutely zero agenda, I have no desire to clamor for really anything. I'm happy just being who I am. It gives me enormous freedom, and I value that above all else. I feel a little concerned about fairly intelligent, rational people one grew up respecting, knowing, who somehow, somewhere down the line, they sell out because a Rajya Sabha nomination comes up, right, or there's a gas agency going for one of their relatives, or a free plot of land somewhere else, or some kind of an inducement, which of course comes with strings attached, and it's always driven by a political party or some kind of an alignment. And eventually you end up speaking on behalf of your masters. And it is a cause of worry, because we need independent voices more than ever right now. And we don't have that many of them, because no one wants to take that risk. No one wants to take the chance. And as it was pointed out yesterday to me by Bhaskar, who's sitting there in the front row, that a lot of our highly respected senior journalists today have forgotten to be journalists. They've become brands and celebrities. And so they're doing their jobs very differently than the way they were functioning maybe 5 years ago.
Well, so what do you think has changed? I mean, what is the necessity for them to change? Is it TRPs, or is it their own necessity to be out there?
I think it's a whole complex, it's a syndrome, it's the celebrity syndrome. Not too many people can either handle it, deal with it, come to terms with all that it presents on a platter. It's fame, it's money, it's recognition, it's power, really. Especially if you're in media and you're an anchor who's yelling everybody else down night after night. I guess it makes you a bit of a megalomaniac, and you lose perspectives completely unless there's some kind, there have to be checks and balances. And the only checks and balances in a democracy are the citizens. It's the people who have the vote, it's the people who have their opinion, and so long as India remains a democracy, I think they really ought to exercise their democratic right to say, off you go. But we don't, or we should, more assertively than we do.
Well, I mean, there's always a choice that someone makes. And well, over here, I guess that leads to my next question as to, so how important is free speech? How many of them really accept free speech as one knows it?
How many of them as in?
As in the population that we're talking about. We've got, people representing each opinion, each view. So how much do you think we value each other's free speech in this free country, in this democratic country?
I would say it's not as terrible a situation as the media might want to make it look like. Free speech is something that every Indian deeply, deeply values. It's a very argumentative country. We are an opinionated country. We are volatile. We are articulate. And nothing can keep us down. You will see it. It's like a hydra, multi-headed monster. no matter how hard you try to silence an Indian, you won't succeed beyond a point. Free speech is something, it is ingrained in every citizen, everybody, that it is their birthright and they will exercise it.
Well, sometimes you see this assertiveness leads to, some sort of an inner humor. Do you humor sometimes in this kind of intolerance that exists?
A lot of it. In fact, I think the advertising community is brilliant at capturing the zeitgeist and, in a way, turning it on its head and leading to a wonderful dialogue which says, laugh at yourselves, don't take everything so seriously. And this is the issue, but you can look at it this way, and you can look at it that way. And especially in the representation of how women negotiate their domestic lives and professional lives, I think there's been a tremendous kind of change in the way they're presented in our commercials. Even the way older people are being presented, senior citizens are being presented. They're no longer the becharas that, the children are sort of forced to take care of. I mean, senior citizens today have found a completely new dignity, and it's really thanks to very powerful advertising messages that are going out, which shows them in charge of their lives. These are all subliminal messages, but they go a long, long way towards influencing change and influencing opinion.
Well, thank you very much that you mentioned that, because we've also seen in the recent past, most of our brands are using advertising to make, this change. Do you think it's a genuine effort to make the change, or is it to capitalize the market?
Well, I think the young copywriters, the young filmmakers today are speaking in a fantastic new language. They're breaking a lot of rules, which is what it's essential to do that. And the goody-goody advertising of old, which was just, great, wonderful, ennobling messages about how terrific everybody is, that has changed. I mean, I do have issues with a few products, not the advertising of those products, because, I mean, you're doing a job, that's your client, you have to sell that product. I have a problem with Fair and Lovely fairness creams.
Or the other.
Yes, and so I really appreciate the campaign, which is unlovely, fair, lovely and not fair, or someone help me out. It's unfair and lovely. Unfair and lovely, fabulous. I mean, that's again something that makes you think.
Yes.
I would essentially love it if the advertising agency, as a matter of principle, refused to support pan masala ads. But then our movie stars would be much poorer if that happened. So I guess it's a win-win situation for everybody. But cigarettes, despite the warning, I wish some of these best brains that are here would take a person called Devendra something. I've always wanted to meet him and give him a piece of my mind, who makes this public interest advertising, the little, which come, all the multiplexes show them, where it's about cigarette smoking or just terrible ads. They're awful, the pseudo-patriotic little messages. And Devendra, what's his name? He has his name larger than anything else on the screen for those few seconds. And they're all dreadful, and I wonder how he gets that slot. So even these powerful messages, there's a way to communicate that message. I mean, I'm very anti-cigarettes myself, but I actually shut my eyes because I don't want to see, it's a very long message, and it's shot in a way that almost makes you feel repulsed on one level and almost reach for something to, calm your nerves seeing that. So it's counterproductive. I mean, a strong, powerful message, like even being outspoken, there has to be a point to it. Otherwise, I mean, just being outspoken for the sake of being outspoken you're just creating more noise, and we know we have enough noise pollution in the world. We don't need more of it.
Well, do you think it's only the women who need to be outspoken? What about the men in this room? Do you all agree?
Have the men ever sought any other option in life? I don't think so. It's taken for granted. You're born a man, you're outspoken, because the family, culture, everything, in a way, encourages you to assert yourself and speak your mind. If you choose not to, that's a different that's a different story.
Well, somehow you've always been in the light, you know, for being the crusader for women's rights. So what happens to the men, you know, who are feeling the intolerance in today's time?
It's, you know, just to have a label like Crusader for Women, I'm very happy with it. I'm not quarreling at all, because 90% of the time women need it much more than most men do. But it's about speaking up for equality more than just saying, I will choose a gender to speak up for and that's it. If I have many times in the past, and I will continue to do so in future, given the chance, speak up for any guy who I feel is really getting a hard time and is being unfairly put down by anybody, including a woman in his life. So I don't think, you know, gender neutrality is what we should all be aiming for, because that just makes for a more equal world and a more level playing field. But the way society is structured, it's weighed completely against, I mean, 90% of the women don't have the chance to speak for themselves at all. At all. A very high percentage of women don't get the chance to be born in the first place. So we are dealing with a very complex set of issues where it needed our President Kalam to point out at one of his seminars that he felt so badly about this, and he was so saddened by it, that in India often the value of a woman in our society is less than the value that's put on a bicycle or a buffalo. So if it's something that I think we're obliged to, men and women, to stand up if they see a woman obviously being put down upon, don't you think?
Well, I would agree with you. I think that's slowly changing. We're addressing it through various mediums, and it's truly, truly changing. But if you look at this front row, there are quite a few important fathers of advertising. What about the mothers of advertising?
Good question. We should ask the fathers here. We should ask Bobby and Bhaskar and Sam and all the other people that I see in the front row. But you know, even when you look at a jury, for example, and I talked about it about 10 or 15 years ago, when every year after year after year, there'd be the Economic Times Awards, for example, and not a single woman's opinion was ever sought. Even today, there are awards given for women achievers with only men on the jury. I mean, I find that very baffling, because surely the advertising community, which drives a lot of change in the most positive way, yeah, where are the moms, the advertising moms?
And you've got like a tattoo that says mom.
Well, yes, I do. But but Bobby, even when I'm talking of in my dinosaur years, and I started my career as in advertising, there were a lot of women in advertising in leadership positions. Somewhere along the way, they dropped by the wayside, and it'll be interesting to ask you what happened to them. But they don't get the recognition, Bobby. Where are they? Where are they today?
Take this mic.
It'll be interesting to hear, for everyone to hear what you're saying about this.
Check.
A lot of them have retired and prematurely retired. Look at someone like a Rhoda, or there were women who headed ad agencies. There were fantastic women you yourself nurtured and who worked with you as colleagues.
Yeah, there are a lot of them. You see, what happened is, again, coming back to what you originally said, even women who have achieved, the women achievers, initially did not assert themselves sufficiently. Even those who broke the glass ceiling were surrounded by these patriarchal mindset to the extent that they felt cowed down upon, you know. But I think the good news is that that is very definitely changing, and it is changing very fast, because today if you look at these wide spectrum of professions and careers, you're now beginning to see a lot more women coming into, from banking to information technology. I mean, there is high technology women today. I mean, look at the top three, top bankers. They are women.
15, Bobby, heading.
Huh?
15 women who head public sector banks.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, I think, unprecedented in the world.
So this is great. I mean, that's a world where you wouldn't have dreamt that a woman would have gone to the top. So I think it's changing, and I think it's changing for the better.
Good to have an optimistic
Yes.
viewpoint coming in there. As they say, aapke muh mein ghee shakkar. Let's see, next year maybe the front row will have more women.
Thank you very much. I think we need a loud round of applause for that. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And I think we extended this conversation further than this stage. I think we've got time for two questions. One question being, did you address the stereotyped woman with meow of Stardust and then went on to becoming a social commentator? So what has this journey been?
No, it's been fun. It's been absolutely, it's been, I haven't regretted 1 minute of it. Meow was, and the Meow continues, I think it's 44 years since Stardust was launched. And by an advertising professional, Nari Hira, who was the head of creative unit at the time, who had a bright and brilliant idea and was either smart enough or stupid enough to get me on board as an editor with absolutely zero experience in editing. I was 23 at the time. And Stardust was, in many ways, it changed the rules of the way we communicate, the language that we use, and just the irreverence that it brought in, which subsequently has went mainstream. And the 80s and 90s were particularly vibrant times for media as we now see it. They were fantastic editors with, fire in their bellies who went out there. There was something called investigative journalism, which doesn't exist anymore in India. We prefer to get our scoops given to us on a platter by some dodgy source somewhere, and it's a different ball game, so it's fine. Meow was something, a symbol of that spirit. And Meow still exists. And for me, from 23 and I'm 68 today, there have been a lot of things I've done which I've enjoyed every minute of. From starting my career as a model to then becoming a copywriter, then becoming an editor with Nari Hira, starting 3 magazines for him, going on to become a freelance columnist, then a novelist, and now, it's really an extension of something that I started doing when I was pretty young. So I don't see these as great big jumps and highs and lows. It's been kind of like a river finding its own course, and gurgling along and enjoying the whole journey in a way that's delightful, because you never know what's going to show up on the shore, and that's what keeps me on my toes. It keeps me. Also, there's a sense of anticipation. You never know who you're going to meet. You don't know how that's going to transform your life. And as we saw what happened with the Jamuna when Sri Ravi Shankar took it over, even a mighty river like the Jamuna had to bend to, the desecration that can sometimes happen because society is exerting that kind of negative and oppressive pressure on it. So who knows where this river will go, but so far I'm happy with it's not over flooding. It is, I don't see it running dry, so I think I'm enjoying it very much.
Well, is this river going to, take the columns and give it a branded side as well? So what if a brand here asked you to write a column? Would you do that?
Depends on the money.
So, well, that question came from from a member of the audience, and would you?
Just to complete that, because at the end of the day, I'm a professional writer. It's my vocation. It's like asking a surgeon if someone came along and offered you a case, would you go ahead and take it on or not. Well, to make that, that comparison more specific, if I were a thoracic surgeon and someone asked me to amputate a leg, I would say no. So if someone, any brand came up to me and asked me to write on something that I was clearly not competent to write about, I had no expertise at all in, and my opinion would be worth nothing, and I'd be doing it only because it seemed tempting at the time, I'd be doing myself and my own personal brand a huge disservice. So I would know where to draw the line.
Excellent. Well, that question came from Radha Furkan from Experience Commerce.